The bridge of the Pathfinder was quiet as the diplomatic vessel approached the massive station that housed the Galactic Council. Captain Daniel Cross stood near the main viewport with his arms crossed, while watching the structure grow larger against the backdrop of distant stars. The station was enormous and shaped like a ring with thousands of lights glowing from windows and docking ports. Ships from dozens of alien species came and went like insects around a hive. Daniel had seen it before, but the sight never failed to remind him how small humanity was in this vast galaxy. Ambassador Lisa Grant walked up beside him holding a data pad in her hands. She was tired, and Daniel could see it in the way her shoulders slumped forward. For 15 years she had been negotiating with the Council and trying to secure humanity's place among the galactic community. Every year the demands grew worse, and every year humanity bent a little more, hoping that cooperation would earn them respect. It never did. Karen Bailey sat at the communications station with her headset on and her fingers moving across the controls. She had been monitoring Council frequencies for hours and waiting for the latest message that would tell them whether humanity's newest proposal had been accepted. The proposal had been generous and perhaps too generous. Humanity offered to share medical technology and mining rights to 3 colony worlds, and a promise to reduce their military fleet by 30%. All of this just to be granted a seat at the Council table. The message came through at 0900 hours. Karen's face went pale as she read it, and her hands stopped moving. She looked up at Lisa and then at Daniel before speaking. "The Council has sent their response," she said quietly. "It's not good." Lisa took the datapad from Karen and began reading. Her expression changed from hope to confusion and then to pure anger. She read it twice as if not believing what she was seeing. Daniel moved closer and looked over her shoulder at the screen. The words were clear and written in the formal language that the Council used for official decrees. Humanity's application for Council membership was denied again, but that was not the worst part. The Council demanded that humanity surrender control of 70% of their colony worlds, to be administered by Council-appointed governors. All human military vessels except for basic system defense ships were to be dismantled within 6 months. Any future technological development had to be submitted to the Council for approval before it could be used. Trade with non-Council species would be forbidden, and human ships would need Council permits to travel beyond their designated borders. The message was not even delivered by a proper ambassador or dignitary. It came from a junior administrative clerk of a minor species that humanity had never even heard of before. The insult was deliberate and clear. Humanity was not seen as equals or even as worthy of basic respect. They were seen as problems to be controlled and kept in line. Lisa's hands shook as she held the datapad. She had given years of her life to this and had believed that patience and diplomacy would work. Now she saw the truth. The Council never intended to accept humanity as members. They only wanted to break human spirit and make them servants. Daniel felt old anger rising in his chest. He had fought in the First Contact War 20 years ago when humanity first encountered hostile aliens near the colony of New Terra. He had seen friends die in the black of space and had learned that sometimes strength was the only language that mattered. He had hoped that Lisa's way would work, but deep down he always knew it would come to this. "Get me a secure channel to Earth," he said to Karen. "I want to speak with President Morris, directly." The call took 30 minutes to connect, through the encrypted relay network that humanity had built for sensitive communications. When Helen Morris appeared on the screen, she already looked like she knew bad news was coming. She sat in the Oval Office with military advisors standing behind her, and the weight of billions of lives on her shoulders. Lisa explained the Council's demands while trying to keep her voice steady. Helen listened without interrupting, and her expression grew darker with each word. When Lisa finished, there was a long silence. The advisors behind Helen whispered to each other, but she raised her hand and they went quiet. "We have been preparing for this possibility," said Admiral Jacob Pierce, who stepped forward into the camera view. He was a tall man with gray hair and a scar across his left cheek from an old battle injury. "For the past 5 years, we have been developing new weapons and shield technology in secret facilities across the solar system. We anticipated that the Council would eventually push too far. Our scientists have made breakthroughs that put us ahead of Council technology in several key areas." Helen looked directly at the camera and directly at Lisa. "What do you recommend, Ambassador Shi?" asked Lisa, took a deep breath. I recommend we recall all diplomatic staff from Council Space and close all communication channels with them. We should fortify our borders and make it clear that we will not submit to their demands. No more negotiations and no more compromises. We tried their way for 15 years and it got us nowhere except deeper into servitude. Daniel felt a surge of pride hearing Lisa say what he had been thinking for years. She had been a believer in diplomacy, but even she had reached her limit. Helen nodded slowly. I agree, she said. I will convene an emergency session of the Colonial Congress, but I already know what they will say. The people are tired of being treated like children. There have been protests on every world demanding that we stand up to the Council. This latest insult will only make them angrier. She paused and looked at something off-screen before continuing. I am authorizing the recall of all human personnel from Council Space effective immediately. Ambassador Grant, you and the Pathfinder are to return home as quickly as possible. Captain Cross, be prepared for possible hostility during your departure. Admiral Pierce, begin full mobilization of our defensive fleets. From this moment forward, humanity stands alone and we will defend ourselves by any means necessary. The transmission ended and the screen went dark. Lisa sat down heavily in a nearby chair and put her face in her hands. Daniel wanted to say something comforting, but words seemed inadequate. Karen started sending out recall orders to every human diplomat and merchant and civilian in Council Space. They had 48 hours to get to human territory before the borders closed. Daniel walked to the helm station where Lieutenant Ryan Cole was waiting for orders. Set course for home, he said. Maximum speed and take us through the outer routes. I don't want to encounter any Council patrols if we can avoid it. Ryan's fingers danced over the controls and the Pathfinder began to turn away from the Council station. Before they left, Lisa stood up and walked to the communications console. She composed a final message to the Galactic Council, and her words were sharp and clear. For 15 years, humanity has sought peace and partnership with the Council. We have made concessions and offered friendship and tried to prove ourselves worthy of acceptance. In return, you have given us nothing but contempt and impossible demands. You have treated us not as potential allies, but as subjects to be controlled. This ends now. Humanity withdraws from all negotiations and closes all diplomatic channels. We will defend our territory and our freedom with every resource we possess. You pushed too far. Do not follow us. She sent the message without waiting for approval, and Daniel smiled. It was about time humanity stopped asking for permission to exist. The Pathfinder accelerated away from the station and headed toward the jump point that would take them home. Behind them, the Galactic Council continued their business, unaware that they had just created their greatest enemy. Humanity would no longer bow, and the galaxy was about to learn what that meant. 3 months had passed since humanity closed its borders, and the Galactic Council was beginning to realize they had made a serious mistake. Supreme Chancellor Krixthar stood in the central chamber of the Council station, staring at the holographic display that showed the entire galaxy. The section representing human space was now shaded in red, indicating a communications blackout. No messages came out and no messages went in. It was unprecedented. Krixthar was an insectoid being from the Thraxian species with 4 arms and compound eyes that could see in multiple spectrums. He had led the Council for 30 years, and never once had a species simply refused to communicate. Even the most hostile races eventually came to the negotiating table. But humans were different, and their silence was more unsettling than any threat could have been. Intelligence Director Vorn Kell entered the chamber, carrying a data crystal containing the latest reports. He was a reptilian creature with green scales and a long tail that swished nervously behind him. The news was not good, and he knew the Chancellor would not be pleased. Every attempt to send probe ships into human territory had failed. The probes either disappeared completely or were destroyed by automated defense platforms before they could gather any data. What do we know? He asked Krixthar. Without turning from the display, Vorn Kell activated the crystal, and images appeared in the air around them. We know that every human border system has activated powerful jamming fields that block all our sensors. Trade ships from neutral species report that humans are turning everyone away at their borders. Any vessel that ignores warnings and continues forward is met with weapon. This lock from defense stations. Several merchant captains claim the stations are new and far more advanced than anything humans had 3 months ago. Krixthar's mandibles clicked together in frustration. How is this possible? We had intelligence reports on their military capabilities. They should not be able to field this kind of defensive network so quickly. Vornkel hesitated before answering. It appears the humans were preparing for this scenario for years. Our analysts believe they have been secretly developing new technology while pretending to be cooperative. The facilities on their outer colonies were not just research stations as we thought. They were military production centers. In human space, the transformation was indeed underway, and it was massive in scope. Admiral Greg Stone stood on the observation deck of the Mars Orbital Shipyard, watching the construction of the newest warship. The vessel was twice the size of anything humanity had built before, with armor plating that could withstand plasma fire and weapons systems that made older ships look like toys. 50 ships like this were being built simultaneously. Across human space, and more were planned. Greg was a career military man who had spent 40 years in the fleet, rising through the ranks during peacetime when most people thought humanity would never need a large military again. He had argued for years that the galaxy was not safe and that humans needed to be strong. Now everyone was listening to him and giving him unlimited resources to build a defense force. The shipyard manager approached him with a status report. "Admiral, we are ahead of schedule on the Defiance and her sister ships. The new armor composite is performing better than expected in stress tests. The railgun batteries are fully operational, and the shield generators are ready for installation." Greg nodded with satisfaction. "What about the crew assignments? We have volunteers from every colony. Too many volunteers, actually. We had to turn away thousands of qualified personnel. Everyone wants to serve after what the Council tried to do to us." Deep below the surface of Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, a secret facility hummed with activity. Dr. Claire Johnson walked through the research complex, checking on the progress of various projects. She was a physicist who had been recruited 5 years ago to work on what was called Project SHIELD. The goal was simple: to create defensive technology that could stop anything the Council might throw at humanity. Claire stopped at a viewport overlooking the main testing chamber. Inside the chamber, a small generator produced a shimmering field of energy. Technicians fired plasma bolts at the field from various angles, and the energy was absorbed completely with no damage to the generator. The plasma shield technology was working, and it was ready for deployment. Her assistant, Nathan Brooks, came running up with excitement on his face. "Dr. Johnson, the test results are incredible. The shield absorbed plasma fire equivalent to what a Council heavy cruiser could produce. The power consumption is within acceptable limits, and we can scale it up for capital ship use." Claire allowed herself a small smile. "Get the specifications to Admiral Stone immediately. I want these shields installed on every ship in the fleet within 2 months." Captain Daniel Cross had survived the journey home aboard the Pathfinder, and now he found himself commanding something much more powerful. The warship Defiance was his, and she was beautiful in a deadly way. He stood on her bridge, running his hands over the captain's chair while his new crew worked around him, preparing for their first patrol. Lieutenant Kevin Ross was his tactical officer, and a young man who had graduated top of his class at the Naval Academy. He was checking weapon systems with the focus of someone who knew lives would depend on his accuracy. Engineer Megan Torres worked below in the engine room, making sure every system was perfect. She was brilliant with machines and had a reputation for keeping ships running long past when they should have failed. Daniel called his senior staff together for a briefing in the conference room. On the table was a holographic map of human space and the surrounding sectors. He pointed to the border systems where they would be patrolling. "Our mission is simple," he said. "We protect the border, and we send a message to anyone watching that humans will not be pushed around anymore. If Council ships approach, we give them one warning to turn back. If they refuse, we disable their engines and send them home. We are not looking for a fight, but we will not run from one either." Kevin studied the map carefully. "What if they come in force, sir? What if they send a fleet?" Daniel met his eyes. "Then we hold the line until reinforcements arrive. But I do not think they will try anything soon. The Council is used to species backing down. They do not know how to deal with Defiance yet." On Earth, President Helen Morris prepared to address the United Colonies in a broadcast that would be sent to every human world. She sat at her desk in the Oval Office with the flag behind her, and a speech written by her own hand. This was not a moment for advisors or speechwriters. This needed to come from her heart. The cameras went live, and she began speaking. "My fellow humans, we stand today at a crossroads in our history. For 15 years we have tried to join the Galactic Council through peaceful means. We offered friendship and cooperation and compromise. In return, we received only contempt and demands that would have made us slaves in all but name." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Some of you may wonder if we made the right choice by refusing the council. Some may fear that we are now alone and vulnerable.
I am here to tell you that we are stronger than we have ever been.
We have always been at our best when we stand together against those who would oppress us. Our ancestors fought for freedom on Earth, and now we fight for freedom among the stars." The broadcast continued for 20 minutes, and Helen spoke of unity and strength and the right of humanity to determine its own future. She explained the military buildup and assured everyone that humanity could defend itself. She ended with a quote from old Earth history: "We will not go quietly into the night. We will not surrender without a fight. We will survive, and we will thrive." The speech was intercepted by Council Intelligence Services within hours. Vornkel brought it to Chancellor Kriksthar, and they watched it together in silence. When it ended, Kriksthar's compound eyes seemed to darken. "They mean it," he said quietly. "They are not bluffing or posturing. They truly intend to stand alone." Vornkel nodded. "What should we do, Chancellor? Some council members are calling for military action. They say we cannot allow one species to defy us openly, or others will follow their example." Kriksthar thought for a long moment. "Assemble a fleet," he finally said. "Not to attack, but to intimidate. We will send enough ships to remind the humans of their place in the galactic order. When they see our power, they will reconsider their foolish decision." It was the worst decision Kriksthar would ever make, and one that would cost the Council dearly. But he did not know that yet. None of them did. Admiral Vex Euler received his orders 3 days later. He was to take a fleet of 300 warships representing dozens of Council species and travel to the edge of human space. There he would demand humanity's immediate surrender and acceptance of all Council terms. It was supposed to be a simple show of force that would bring the humans back into line. Vex Euler was confident as he assembled his fleet. 300 ships against a species barely 2 centuries into space travel. It would not even be a fair fight. He sent word to his captains to prepare for departure, and within a week the largest Council fleet in 50 years was ready to move. The bridge of the Defiance, Captain Daniel Cross, received a priority alert from border monitoring stations. A large fleet had been detected moving toward human space from Council territory. The size was estimated at over 300 vessels. Kevin Ross looked at the data with concern. "Sir, that is a significant force. Should we fall back and wait for reinforcements?" Daniel smiled grimly. "No, we hold position and we send word to Admiral Stone. If the Council wants to test us, then we will give them a lesson they will not forget. Humanity does not run anymore." The Council fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the frontier system, and the sight was meant to inspire terror. 300 warships of every size and shape hung in space like a swarm of metal predators. Admiral Vex Euler sat in his command chair aboard the flagship Eternal Justice and felt satisfaction wash over him. This display of power would surely break human resolve and bring them crawling back to negotiations. He activated the communications array and began broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is Admiral Vex Euler of the Galactic Council Fleet speaking to human authorities. You have defied Council authority and rejected terms that were given for your own benefit. Your isolation ends now. You will power down all defensive systems and prepare to receive Council representatives who will oversee your compliance with all previous demands. You have 1 hour to respond with your unconditional surrender." The message was transmitted, and Vex Euler waited for the inevitable reply. He expected pleading or perhaps desperate attempts to negotiate. What he got was silence. The human border stations did not respond, and no ships appeared to meet them. The emptiness was somehow worse than any threat. Then the sensors went completely haywire. Alarms blared across the bridge, and tactical officers shouted in confusion. 50 contacts appeared on the display surrounding the Council fleet, in a perfect sphere formation. They had not come from faster-than-light travel, and they had not been detected approaching. They had simply appeared as if materializing from nothing. Vex Euler stared at the display in disbelief. "Cloaking technology," he whispered. "They have working cloaking technology." The human warships were smaller than most Council vessels, but they bristled with weapons, and their hulls had a predatory sleekness that spoke of speed and agility. At the center of the formation was the Defiance, and on her bridge Captain Daniel Cross stood with his arms behind his back, watching the Council fleet on his own displays. Kevin Ross reported from Tactical. All weapons charged and ready, sir. Shields at maximum power. All ships in the battle group report ready status. Daniel nodded and opened a channel to the Council flagship. His voice was calm and cold. Admiral Vexular, you were warned to stay out of human space. You chose to ignore that warning. I am Captain Daniel Cross of the human warship Defiance. You have one chance to turn your fleet around and leave immediately. If you do not comply, we will consider your presence an act of war and respond accordingly. On the Eternal Justice, Vexular's face twisted in anger. A human captain was threatening him. A species that should be grateful just to exist in Council space was making demands. His pride would not allow such insult to stand. All ships open fire, he commanded. Destroy these arrogant primitives. 300 warships unleashed their weapons simultaneously. Plasma bolts in every color streaked through space along with missiles and energy beams. The amount of firepower was enough to crack a planet's crust, and it all converged on the 50 human ships. The crews of the Council fleet watched their displays, expecting to see the human vessels torn apart. Instead, the plasma and missiles struck invisible barriers and dissipated harmlessly. The human shields held without even flickering. The energy that should have vaporized the ships was absorbed and redirected into space. Claire Johnson's plasma shield technology was performing exactly as designed. On the Defiance, Megan Torres monitored the shields from engineering. Shields holding at 98% capacity, she called out. No damage to any systems. We can take a lot more than that. Daniel allowed himself a thin smile. Return fire, he ordered. Show them what we have been building. The human fleet responded with weapons that the Council had never seen before. Railguns mounted along the hulls of each ship. Fired tungsten rods accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. The projectiles were simple metal, but at such velocities they hit with the force of nuclear weapons. They punched through Council shields as if they were made of paper, and tore through armor plating like tissue. Missiles followed, and these were not the simple explosive warheads the Council used. Human missiles carried plasma warheads with yields that had been theoretical, until humanity poured resources into making them real. They struck Council ships and detonated with fury that consumed everything nearby. Within the first 3 minutes of combat, 30 Council ships were either destroyed or crippled beyond repair. Explosions blossomed across the battlefield, and debris began to spread through the system. Vexular watched in horror as his fleet was torn apart by an enemy he had underestimated completely. Evasive maneuvers, he screamed. Reform the line and concentrate fire on their command ship. The Council fleet tried to regroup, but human ships were faster and more maneuverable. They darted between the larger Council vessels, firing precisely and moving before return fire could target them. Kevin Ross coordinated the assault with ruthless efficiency and called out targets to the weapons crews. Every shot counted, and the humans made every shot matter. A Council cruiser tried to flank the Defiance, but Daniel saw it coming. He ordered Helm to bring the ship about, and Megan pushed the engines beyond their rated capacity. The Defiance spun on its axis and presented its full weapons array to the cruiser. A salvo of railgun rounds hit the cruiser's bridge, and the ship went dark, tumbling through space without power. Admiral Vexular realized too late that this was not a battle he could win. His ships were dying, and human casualties were minimal. He had to save what was left of his fleet. All ships retreat, he ordered. Jump to faster than light immediately. But Daniel had anticipated this. The human battle group had positioned ships behind the Council fleet specifically to block their escape routes. When Council ships tried to activate their jump drives, they found themselves unable to form stable wormholes. Human jamming technology was preventing their escape. Vexular felt true fear for the first time in his long military career. They are trapping us, he said to his bridge crew. They planned this from the beginning. Daniel opened another channel to the Council flagship. Admiral, you have two choices. Order your ships to power down weapons and surrender, or I will destroy every vessel in your fleet. You have 5 minutes to decide. The bridge of the Eternal Justice fell silent. Vexular looked at his tactical display and saw the truth. Most of his ships were damaged, and those that were not were surrounded by human vessels that could destroy them at will. His officers waited for his command, and the weight of hundreds of thousands of lives pressed down on him. He had been so confident and so certain that human technology could not match Council power. He had thought this would be a simple intimidation mission. Instead, he had led his people into a slaughter. All ships stand down, he said quietly. Power down weapons and lower shields. We surrender. Across the battlefield, Council ships went dark one by one. Captains who had served with distinction for decades now faced the humiliation of surrender to a species they had considered inferior. 214 ships complied with the order. The remaining vessels either could not hear the command due to battle damage or their captains refused to surrender. Those ships fought on, and they died quickly. Human ships showed no mercy to those who continued fighting. Within 10 minutes, the last resisting Council vessel was destroyed, and the Battle of the Frontier was over. Daniel ordered his ships to begin rescue operations for Council crews in disabled vessels. He would not leave survivors to die in space even if they were enemies. It was not the human way. Shuttles launched from the human fleet and began pulling survivors from wrecked ships. On Earth, news of the victory reached President Helen Morris within hours. She sat in the Situation Room surrounded by military advisors and watched the battle recordings that had been transmitted from the Defiance. The room was silent as they watched human ships tear through the Council fleet with precision and overwhelming firepower. Admiral Greg Stone spoke first. Casualties on our side are minimal. 3 ships took moderate damage, but all are operational. Enemy casualties are severe. Over 1,000 Council ships destroyed and the rest surrendered. It is the most one-sided victory in modern warfare. Helen felt relief and concern in equal measure. We won, but this will not be the end. The Council cannot allow this defeat to stand. They will come again with even more ships, Greg nodded. I have already ordered all colonies to accelerate fortification efforts. Claire Johnson is expanding production of shield generators and weapon systems. We will be ready when they come. On the Galactic Council station, Chancellor Crix Thar received the news of the fleet's defeat with disbelief. He read the casualty reports 3 times, hoping he had misunderstood the numbers. Over 1,000 ships lost and 200 captured. It was the worst military disaster in Council history. Intelligence Director Vorn Kell stood nearby, waiting for the inevitable outburst. But Crix Thar did not rage or shout. Instead, he sat down slowly and stared at nothing. We have awakened something terrible, he said quietly. We pushed them and they pushed back harder than we thought possible. Member species of the Council began transmitting urgent messages demanding explanations. Some called for immediate retaliation, while others questioned whether the Council could even defeat humanity in open war. The cracks in Council unity were beginning to show. Crix Thar knew he had to act decisively or risk losing control completely. He called for an emergency session of the full Council. Representatives from 200 species gathered in the Great Chamber, and the arguing began immediately. Some demanded peace negotiations while others called for total war. The chamber echoed with dozens of languages as species that had rarely disagreed now found themselves divided. Finally, Crix Thar called for silence. We have a choice to make, he said. We can accept that humanity wishes to remain independent and leave them alone, or we can invoke the Purge Protocol and declare them a threat that must be eliminated. There is no middle ground anymore. The chamber erupted in discussion again. The Purge Protocol was ancient law and had only been used twice in galactic history. Once invoked, every Council member species was required to contribute military forces to eliminate the threat. It was total war by definition. The vote was called and species cast their decisions. It was close, but the outcome was clear. The Purge Protocol passed by a narrow margin. Humanity was now officially declared an existential threat to galactic peace. Every Council species would be required to send ships and soldiers to end the human problem permanently. Vorn Kell left the chamber and immediately began coordinating the largest military buildup the galaxy had ever seen. This would not be 300 ships. This would be thousands. And humanity would fay the full might of the Galactic Council. 6 months had passed since the Battle of the Frontier, and the Galactic Council was transforming into something it had never been before. The great station that housed the Council chambers now bustled with military officers from 100 different species, all coordinating the largest war effort in recorded history. Chancellor Crix Thar watched from his private observation deck as warships from across the galaxy arrived in groups of dozens and sometimes hundreds. The Purge Protocol had been invoked, and every member species was required to contribute forces. Some came willingly, eager to crush the human upstarts who had dared challenge Council authority. Others came reluctantly, fearing what would happen if they refused. But they all came, and the fleet grew larger each day. Intelligence Director Vorn Kell entered the observation deck carrying the latest status reports. We now have commitments for over 2,000 warships from 103 species, he said. The assembly point has been established in the neutral zone, 3 jumps from human space. Grand Admiral Thexmore has been given supreme command of all forces. Crixthar nodded slowly. 2,000 ships. Surely even the humans cannot stand against such a force. Vornkel hesitated before speaking again. There is concern among some species, Chancellor. The humans have proven more capable than we anticipated. Their technology is advancing at an alarming rate, and our intelligence gathering has been completely blocked. We do not know what other surprises they may have prepared. Then we will overwhelm them with sheer numbers. No amount of advanced technology can overcome such odds. Deep in human space, Captain Daniel Cross was no longer commanding just one ship. He had been promoted to Commodore and now led a battle group of 20 warships tasked with disrupting Council supply lines. His tactics had become legendary among both human and Council forces. He struck without warning and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive and always hit the enemy where they were. Weakest, the Defiance and her sister ships had been conducting raids for months, and the Council was feeling the effects. Supply convoys required heavy escorts, which slowed the buildup of the main fleet. Construction facilities had to divert resources to defense. Every raid cost the Council time and resources they could not afford to lose. Kevin Ross had become even more skilled at tactical analysis and could predict enemy movements with uncanny accuracy. He sat at his station studying a map of Council space with dozens of potential targets marked. Commodore, there's a major supply depot in the Kelmar system with minimal defenses. Intelligence suggests they are stockpiling weapons and ammunition for the main fleet. If we hit it now, we could delay their offensive by weeks. Daniel considered the information carefully. The Kelmar system was deep in Council territory, and getting there meant passing through several patrol zones. But the potential payoff was worth the risk. Set course for Kelmar, he ordered. We go in fast and we hit them hard. Maximum stealth until we reach the target, then full offensive. I want to be gone before they know what happened. The battle group jumped into faster-than-light travel and began the dangerous journey into enemy space. Meanwhile on Europa, Claire Johnson was working on humanity's newest weapon, and this one would change everything. She stood in the main laboratory watching technicians assemble the first prototype of what she called a quantum torpedo. The weapon was based on principles that the Council had not even theorized yet. It could phase through shields and armor as if they did not exist and then detonate inside the target vessel. The explosion would tear a ship apart from within, and no amount of defensive technology could stop it. The problem was the torpedoes were extremely expensive to produce and required exotic materials that were difficult to obtain. Nathan Brooks worked beside her running calculations on the torpedo's effectiveness. Dr. Johnson, the test results are beyond our expectations. One torpedo can destroy a ship 3 times the size of our largest warships, but we can only produce about 50 of them with our current resources. After that, we will need months to gather more materials. Claire nodded thoughtfully. 50 torpedoes. We will need to use them wisely and save them for the most critical targets. Get them loaded onto the fleet's capital ships and brief the weapons officers on their capabilities. These torpedoes could turn the tide of the battle. On Earth, President Helen Morris stood before the Colonial Congress, giving what she knew might be her final address before the war reached humanity's home. The chamber was packed with representatives from every human colony, and the weight of their collective fear and determination filled the air. My fellow humans, we face the greatest challenge our species has ever known. The Galactic Council has assembled a fleet of 2,000 warships with one purpose: to destroy us completely. They believe that their numbers will crush our spirit and force us to surrender. They are wrong. She paused and let her words resonate through the chamber. We have spent these months preparing for this moment. Every colony has contributed to our defense. Every shipyard has worked around the clock to build our fleet. Every citizen has done their part. We now have 300 warships equipped with the finest technology humanity can create. Yes, we are outnumbered, but we have something they do not. We have the will to fight for our freedom no matter the cost. The representatives rose to their feet and the applause was thunderous. Helen waited for quiet before continuing. The Council believes we will break when we see their armada. They think we are young and weak and afraid. Let me tell you what I told them 6 months ago. We will not go quietly. We will not surrender. We will defend our home and our right to exist. And if they want to take that from us, they will pay a price they cannot imagine. The session ended and Helen returned to her office where Admiral Greg Stone was waiting with the latest military briefings. The Council fleet will be ready to move in 2 weeks, he said. They are assembling at a staging area just outside our sensor range. Grand Admiral Thexmore is an experienced commander who has fought in dozens of conflicts. He will not underestimate us the way Vexular did. Helen sat down heavily. Where will they strike? Greg pointed to a star chart on the wall. They will come straight for Earth. The Council wants to end this quickly and decisively. They will bypass our outer colonies and drive directly for the heart of human space. We will position our fleet in the Sol system and make our stand there. Daniel Cross and his battle group returned from their raid on the Kelmar system 3 days later. The raid had been successful beyond expectations. The supply depot was destroyed along with 6 Council warships that had been guarding it. More importantly, the raid had forced the Council to divert ships to protect other supply lines, which weakened their main fleet slightly. But Daniel knew it was not enough. Even with all their raids and disruptions, the Council still had overwhelming numbers. He was summoned to a strategy meeting on Mars where all senior commanders were gathering to finalize plans for the defense of Earth. The meeting took place in a secure bunker, deep beneath the Martian surface. Admiral Greg Stone stood at the head of a large table with holographic displays, showing the disposition of both fleets. Around the table sat the commanders who would lead humanity's defense, including Daniel, and several officers he had served with over the years. Greg began the briefing without preamble. The Council fleet will arrive in the Sol system within 10 days. They have 2,000 warships representing the combined military might of over 100 species. We have 300 ships. The odds are not in our favor, but we have advantages they do not. We know the terrain. We have superior shield technology and our weapons can penetrate their defenses. Most importantly, we are fighting for our survival while they are fighting because they were ordered to. He gestured to the holographic display. Our strategy is to use the asteroid belt and the outer planets as cover. We will draw them in and hit them from multiple angles. The capital ships will hold the center line while our faster attack ships conduct hit-and-run strikes on their flanks. We will make them bleed for every kilometer they advance. Daniel studied the plan and saw the logic in it. But he also saw the problem. Admiral, with respect, this plan assumes we can inflict enough casualties to make them retreat. What if they do not care about losses? What if they are willing to sacrifice half their fleet just to destroy us? Greg met his eyes. Then we make them sacrifice more than half. We fight until we cannot fight anymore. There is no fallback position and no retreat. Earth is behind us and we will not let the Council reach it. The meeting continued for hours as commanders debated tactics and contingencies. When it finally ended, Daniel returned to the Defiance feeling the weight of what was coming. His crew was waiting and they could see the concern on his face. Megan Torres approached him quietly. Sir, we have been running simulations based on the intelligence reports. Even with our advantages, the odds of victory are less than 30%. Most scenarios show us being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Daniel nodded. I know, but we have survived worse odds before. And this time we are not just fighting for ourselves. We are fighting for every human who will ever be born. That has to count for something. Across the galaxy, Grand Admiral Thexmore gave the order for the fleet to move. 2,000 warships began the journey toward human space in the largest military formation ever assembled. Thexmore was confident but not arrogant. He had studied the Battle of the Frontier and learned from Vexular's mistakes. He would not underestimate the humans, and he would not give them opportunities to use their tactical advantages. His plan was simple and brutal. The fleet would jump directly into the Sol system in a tight formation that prevented the humans from isolating and destroying smaller groups. They would advance steadily, absorbing whatever damage the humans could inflict, and then crush the defense with overwhelming firepower. Speed and aggression would win the day. The journey took 7 days, and during that time both sides prepared for what would be the largest space battle in history. Human crews drilled constantly, and Claire Johnson personally delivered the quantum torpedoes to each capital ship. President Helen Morris visited the fleet and spoke to as many crews as possible, thanking them for their service and sacrifice. On the 8th day, the Council fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system. Thexmore looked at his displays and saw the human fleet waiting near Earth's orbit, 300 ships against his 2,000. He opened a channel and broadcast to the human forces. This is Grand Admiral Thexmore of the Galactic Council. You have one final chance to surrender and accept Council authority. Refuse and we will destroy every ship, every station, and every installation in this system. Your species will be scattered and broken. Choose wisely. From the bridge of the Defiance, Daniel Cross heard the message and smiled grimly. He opened his own channel and his response was heard across both fleets. This is Commodore Daniel Cross speaking for humanity. You want Earth, then come and take it. The Battle of Sol began with a wave of fire that would have incinerated entire fleets from previous eras. 2,000 Council warships opened fire simultaneously and space itself seemed to burn with plasma and energy beams. The human fleet of 300 ships faced the onslaught with shields raised, and every crew member knowing that retreat was not an option. Earth hung behind them, blue and beautiful and worth dying for. On the bridge of the Defiance, Commodore Daniel Cross watched the tactical display as enemy fire converged on the human defensive line. The shields held, but the sheer volume of incoming weapons fire was staggering. Beside him, Kevin Ross called out target priorities while coordinating return fire with the rest of the fleet. In engineering, Megan Torres pushed the reactors to their absolute limits, keeping power flowing to shields and weapons even as systems began to overheat. The human fleet did not try to meet the Council charge head-on. Instead, they scattered into pre-planned formations using the asteroid belt and the gravity wells of the outer planets as cover. Admiral Greg Stone commanded the defense from the battleship Resolute, and his orders were clear. Make them chase us and bleed them with every kilometer they advance. Council ships pursuing human vessels found themselves ambushed by hidden defense platforms that Daniel's raiders had positioned over the past months. Automated weapons fired from concealed positions among the asteroids, taking Council ships by surprise. The platforms were destroyed quickly, but not before inflicting casualties. That added up. Grand Admiral Thexmore watched the battle unfold from his flagship and grudgingly admitted that the humans were fighting better than expected. They used the terrain masterfully, and their ships were faster and more maneuverable than intelligence had predicted. But numbers would tell in the end. For every Council ship destroyed, there were 6 more to take its place. The human fleet had no such advantage. He ordered his forces to tighten formation and advance methodically. Stop chasing individual targets, he commanded. We move as one wall and crush everything in our path. Let them come to us. The strategy worked, and the human fleet found itself being pushed back toward Earth. Admiral Greg Stone saw what was happening and made a difficult decision. All ships fall back to the inner system. We make our final stand at Earth's orbit. The human fleet retreated in good order, maintaining their defensive formations and punishing any Council ships that pressed too close. But the cost was mounting. Human ships took damage and casualties. The destroyer Vigilant was hit by concentrated fire and exploded, taking all hands with it. The cruiser Valiant lost its engines and had to be abandoned. The survivors were picked up by other ships, but the losses hurt. Claire Johnson watched the battle from a command center on the moon, surrounded by displays showing every aspect of the engagement. She had given the fleet 50 quantum torpedoes, and now was the time to use them. She opened a channel to Admiral Stone. Admiral, the quantum torpedoes are ready for deployment. I recommend targeting their command ships and largest vessels. Maximum effect for minimum expenditure. Greg approved immediately, and the orders went out to the capital ships carrying the new weapons. The torpedoes were loaded and targeting solutions calculated. The weapons officers had been briefed on the torpedoes' unique capabilities, but this would be their first use in actual combat. The battleship Resolute fired the first quantum torpedo at the Council flagship. The weapon streaked through space and seemed to shimmer as it phased through multiple dimensions. Council point defense systems tried to intercept it, but their targeting systems could not lock onto something that was not entirely in normal space. The torpedo passed through the flagship's shields as if they were smoke and detonated inside the vessel's reactor core. The explosion tore the flagship apart from within. The massive warship that had led the Council fleet simply ceased to exist in one blinding flash. Grand Admiral Thexmore and his entire command staff died instantly. Across the Council fleet, commanders watched in horror as their supreme leader was killed without warning. More quantum torpedoes followed. Capital ships and carriers exploded from internal detonations that no shield could stop. The Council fleet fell into confusion without centralized command, and different species commanders began giving contradictory orders. Some wanted to press the attack while others called for withdrawal. The unity that had held the fleet together began to crack. Daniel saw the opportunity and seized it. All ships attack now, he ordered. Hit them while they are confused. Do not give them time to reorganize. The human fleet surged forward, engaging council ships at close range where their superior maneuverability gave them an edge. The Defiance led the charge, firing railguns and missiles into enemy formations. Kevin Ross picked targets with deadly precision and every shot counted. Megan Torres kept the ship running despite damage that should have crippled them hours ago. The battle raged for 3 days without pause. Human crews fought through exhaustion and pain, knowing that failure meant the end of everything. They rotated personnel through brief rest periods and ate rations at their stations and kept fighting. Council ships began to run low on ammunition and fuel, having expected a shorter engagement. Their logistics had not planned for human resistance this fierce. By the end of the second day, the Council had lost over 800 ships. Human losses were severe as well, with over 100 vessels destroyed or disabled. But the ratio favored humanity, and the Council commanders knew it. Without Grand Admiral Thexmore to enforce discipline, some species began withdrawing their ships from the battle. Small groups at first, but then entire squadrons. On the third day, a Council heavy cruiser broke through the human defensive line, heading directly for Earth. Daniel saw it on his display and knew immediately what he had to do. The Defiance was the closest ship and the only one that could intercept in time. He ordered maximum speed toward the cruiser, and his crew responded without hesitation. Kevin looked at the projected intercept course and understood instantly. Sir, if we ram them at this velocity, both ships will be destroyed. There will not be enough time to evacuate. Daniel met his tactical officer's eyes. I know. Prepare the crew for emergency evacuation. Enion. Who can get to the escape pods has 30 seconds. The rest of you will have to trust me to make this count. Megan Torres appeared on the bridge, having abandoned her station in engineering. With respect, sir, you will need someone to keep the engines running at maximum until impact. I volunteer to stay. Kevin stood from his station. And you will need someone to maintain targeting to ensure the collision angle is precise. I stay as well. Daniel felt pride and sorrow in equal measure. He wanted to order them to leave, but he knew they were right. The mission required their skills. He nodded acceptance and opened the ship-wide channel. All hands, this is the Commodore. Abandon ship immediately. This is not a drill. Get to the escape pods now. Alarms blared throughout the Defiance, and crew members ran for the escape pods. Most made it off in time, but some were too far from evacuation points. Those who remained at their posts did so knowing they would not survive. Daniel watched as the heavy cruiser grew larger on the view screen. The distance closed rapidly. In the final moments before impact, Daniel opened a channel to Admiral Greg Stone. Admiral Cross here. Earth is safe. Tell my family I did my duty. Tell humanity to keep fighting. And tell the Council that we will never surrender. The Defiance struck the Council cruiser at full velocity. The kinetic energy of the impact was equivalent to a nuclear explosion. Both ships disintegrated in a ball of fire and debris. The shockwave spread through the surrounding space, and Council ships nearby were damaged by the blast. But Earth was saved and the breakthrough was stopped. Admiral Greg Stone felt tears on his face as he watched the display. He had lost a friend and one of humanity's finest officers, but there was no time to mourn. The battle still raged. He opened channels to all remaining ships. That is what we are fighting for. That is why we do not give up. For Daniel Cross and for everyone who has fallen. For Earth and for our future. All ships forward. Drive them back. The human fleet attacked with renewed fury. The loss of the Defiance became a rallying cry that pushed exhausted crews beyond their limits. They fought with everything they had, and the Council fleet began to break. More ships withdrew and formation discipline collapsed. What had been an organized armada became scattered groups trying to survive. The acting Council commander was a Thraxian admiral named Kethvar, who had taken charge after Thexmore's death. He looked at the tactical situation and saw the truth. The battle was lost. Continuing would only result in more deaths with no chance of victory. He gave the order that no Council commander had ever given before. All ships retreat. Withdraw from the Sol system immediately. The remaining Council ships turned and fled. Human ships pursued, destroying stragglers, but Admiral Greg Stone eventually called off the chase. Let them go, he ordered. We have won. Earth is safe. The Battle of Sol was over. The cost had been terrible. Over 1,300 Council ships destroyed, and human losses at 160 vessels. The space around Earth was filled with debris from both fleets. Recovery operations would take months, and the casualties numbered in the hundreds of thousands. President Helen Morris addressed humanity from a bunker beneath Geneva. Her voice was steady despite the exhaustion and grief she felt. "My fellow humans, we have won the greatest victory in our history. The Galactic Council came to destroy us, and we turned them back. We paid a terrible price, and we lost people we will never forget. But we proved that humanity cannot be conquered. We proved that our freedom is worth any sacrifice." She paused and looked directly into the camera. "The galaxy tried to make us bow, and we refused. They tried to break us, and we stood firm. From this day forward, humanity walks its own path among the stars. We do not seek conflict, but we will never again submit to those who would make us less than free. We are humanity, and we survive." Years passed, and the Galactic Council never recovered from the defeat at Sol. The loss of so many ships and the failure of the Purge Protocol shattered Council authority. Member species that had long resented Council control began to demand reforms. Some left the Council entirely. The organization that had ruled the galaxy for centuries found its power broken by one young species that refused to kneel. On Earth, a memorial was built to honor those who fell in the Battle of Sol. At its center stood a statue of Commodore Daniel Cross, looking toward the stars with determination on his face. Beneath the statue were the names of all who died defending humanity's freedom. Millions visited the memorial each year to remember and to understand the price of independence. Humanity rebuilt its fleet and continued to explore the galaxy. Other species approached them, carefully seeking trade and alliance. Some asked how humanity had defeated the Council, and the answer was always the same: "We fought for our survival, and we never gave up." That made all the difference. The Defiance was never rebuilt, but her name lived on. Every generation of human warships included a vessel named Defiance to honor the sacrifice of her final crew. And whenever humanity faced challenges or threats, they remembered the words of Daniel Cross: "Come and take it." The galaxy had learned a lesson it would not forget. Humanity could not be pushed too far, because when pushed, humans pushed back harder than anyone expected. They were a young species, but they had proven themselves worthy of respect through courage and sacrifice. And they would never negotiate away their freedom again.